Hey Joe, how you doing today?
I'm doing great, Chris. I'm doing great. Thank you for having me on your show. I'm grateful to be here. How are you today?
Oh, epic, wonderful, glad to have you on. I'm looking so forward to asking people the question: Are you stuck and can't move forward and getting there? We'll get to that in the second piece of the show. For those of you who have watched Expert Showcases, might be a little bit of a new format for you, so just play along, come along, and have an epic day with us. Here at the beginning, we're going to get into Joe's hero's journey because it's really important that you get to know Joe a little bit better so you can know where he's been, what that low point he got to was, and what he did to get himself out and get him where he is today. So Joe, before we dive deep into your hero's journey, give us a quick overview of your hero's journey.
Well, basically, I came up, after high school, went to the military. After the military, I got out. I started, working my own thing, doing my own jobs, basically entrepreneur kind of stuff. I ventured into various different careers. I picked up a lot of leadership training and interpersonal communication training and uh, like neuralistic, uh, neuro-linguistic
NLP.
programming. Yeah, NLP.
Yep.
And so with those kinds of things, I eventually, my career all boiled into one time I just decided that I was going to start helping people with the knowledge that I had and help them get unstuck like I had to do over my journey.
Exactly. That's a great summary. So to kind of reiterate, just to make sure I understand, you started off, had a lot of success. I mean, you were in the military, things were going well. You hit a point in your life where you got stuck, and you had to develop the tools and techniques to get unstuck and move forward. Once you develop
Absolutely.
those tools and techniques, you realize that helping other people with those tools and techniques was not only going to make your life better, but was going to make their life better. And that's why now, today, you help people get unstuck and give them tools and techniques to move forward. That a pretty good summary?
That's a pretty good summary. I like that very much. Absolutely. And yeah, that's the thing, because I love to watch people succeed, and whenever I can help someone move forward and not have to remain in this spinning their wheels mode, and they can actually get out of it, they can actually move forward and create the success they want to have in their lives. That's why I do this. That's why I do what I do.
So let's go back to the beginning. Let's start off because, as for people who know a hero's journey, it normally starts off at the beginning where things are going real well. There's a turning point, some disaster, something happens in their life to make a change, and then things get better, and there's a new normal. So your previous normal, the beginning, you talked about, you went to high school, you got out, you got in the military. Give us a little bit more about that background. Tell us a little bit more about, who where you were and where you were there at the beginning.
Well, whenever I joined the military, that was a point in my life where I started to realize and recognize that I was capable of more things than I thought I was originally capable of doing. That's when I started to recognize my own ability to create my life the way that I wanted it to be if I focused myself in the right directions and did the right things and made the right choices that took me along the way. So I had great fun in the military. I had great success there. I got out and I entered civilian life, and I began to create different things, different projects for myself, and create different careers and business ventures that I wanted to pursue. And
Interesting. So let me interrupt for a second. Let me ask you a
sure.
question because something you just said, I think doesn't go along with my view of the military, and I've got family members in the military. So you said you realized that um, you could make something more for yourself. It seems to me that a lot of people, when they think about military people, it's more of this command and control structure that you're not thinking about how to create stuff, that you're being told exactly what to do. So I'm really intrigued in that beginning part in the military, and in that part, how did you go in an environment that to me on the outside seems as very command and control and ordering structure to saying, wait a minute, I can make things for myself, and I can control things, and I can make things different and better.
Well, one of the things, all right, we're understanding that the military is far different today than it was whenever I went in. I went in the late 80s, right? Dating myself here a little bit, but I went into the Army in 1987, and it was a different military then. It was a different way of, people had different ways of doing things. The military itself had different ways of doing things back then, but one of the things they did, and they do this to everyone, and sometimes people don't recognize it or they're not able to capitalize on it, but the military strips away all your outer layers of gunk. The same way that you go to a coach to get that done, the same way that you go to a psychotherapist to get that done, whatever the case may be, the military strips all that stuff away from you. And depending on what you're doing as a job in the military, it can be more extreme for some than it is for others. And they strip you down to your actual core, and then they build you from there. And as they're building you, you start to recognize that you can do things that you never done before. And if you allow that recognition, if you take that on with the proper perspective, then you recognize that you can. I mean, if you could survive that, if you can get through that, if you can create a desirable outcome from all of that, then you can do it anywhere you want in your life.
Excellent. I love how you aligned it with coaching, about how that's what coaches do. If you get a really good coach, not necessarily do they strip you down, but they teach you how to strip away all the layers
Exactly.
of gunk in your life, to open you up for the new possibilities. That's awesome. So then you got out of the military, and you had already started to say, you already started to make a different. You started to change, which is interesting.
Absolutely.
Before I leave getting out of the military, I think you have I'll say a typical story to a lot of people. I'm not saying you went into the military to change, but a lot of people go into the military because they know they have to get the gunk stripped away, and they have to figure out, and being in that really strict environment is a great way to do it. Kind of like being with a coach at this point, when you need to strip everything away. You need to work with somebody who's gotten unstuck before, to get everything stripped away. So let me ask you one fairly personal question. Did you go into the military knowing you had gunk that you needed to strip away, or was it being there that illustrated that fact?
No, it was just being there that illustrated the fact. I joined the military because I was 17 years old, needed some college money, and I wanted to jump out of airplanes. That's why I mean, at the time I was 17. I mean, you think about that. I just graduated high school. Hey, let's go on an adventure. Let's, I don't want to go to college right now. Let's go on an adventure. Let's go do something. I want to jump out of airplanes. So I did. And that was part of what started this whole thought process for me about being able to create your own circumstances in your life the way you wanted to. I wanted to do it, so I did it. And anybody can actually do that if they allow themselves the proper mindset to be able to allow themselves to do it. Yeah.
Exactly, and that's why it's so critical to work, we'll talk more about working with coaches later, but that's why it's so critical to work with a coach who's been there. I mean, like Joe, who has been there and who sat there and went in for one reason and then realized that they could, make a change. So, basically, since we only have an hour show and I could probably interview you for the rest of the day about your experiences, I think what I'm taking away from this whole thing, and just correct me with a no if I'm wrong, but you went in for one reason. Your eyes were open that there was different things you could do, and through that, you've also been able to, and this is future, we'll talk about it later, is develop tools and techniques based on your military experience that can help people recognize quicker, faster, and easier with less pain how to recognize how to do it in their own life. I mean, is that a fair, quick summary?
Yeah, that's very fair. That's a good summary.
Excellent. So thank you. So you got done with the military, you got civilian life, you started doing some stuff, and at some point, and I don't mean to diminish it, but at some point, it went from being, successful being in the military to getting out, being, at least mildly successful in civilian life, to having some challenges. So and that really becomes where that whole turning point comes in. So
Yeah.
when did you, before we get to the actual turning point, when kind of, can you pick a point where things might have been going good and then started to go down, like a point that people may recognize in their own self that they might be headed towards a downtime?
Well, no, actually, in this particular case with this particular story, there was no warning. There was nothing, and I've went over this, 1,000 times, a million times in my own head, and there was no warning leading up to it, because what had happened is I had a very great thing going. I had a great job. I was making good money. I had just bought a great house. Just everything was going great, and I was running my own magazine, and just life was good. And then at 36 years old, my ex-wife had a late onset of schizophrenia. And bam, out of nowhere, life just, from, one day life was great. The next day, different, and everything changed, and everything spiraled out of control after that day. And it was literally like day and night, just bam, that fast of a change. And because people, you can't see that kind of thing coming. So, there was no warning signs leading up to it, but it stuck me for a long time. I spent 5 years stuck in that hole, of nothing but negativity and despair and worry and fear and everything all around. Yeah.
Wow,
So,
5 years.
and then losing everything, losing my business, losing the excellent career I had, and losing the house, losing vehicles, getting down to nothing, living in not so nice places to live, and those kinds of things, just to be able to, to try to figure it all out, and how to, yeah, it was a mess, yeah.
Yeah, it sounds real challenging. And I think one of the things that's interesting about what you said is that there was no warning. And I think a lot of people feel that way, whether
Right.
there was or wasn't. In your case, there wasn't. But whether there was or wasn't, a lot of people feel that way. There's people watching this video who might even feel that way, that they're stuck right now and that there was no warning. So one of the good things about working with a coach that understands that is that you can understand the feelings of how despair and how desperate it feels, and how, like, why wasn't there any warning? I mean, that would be one
Right.
question I have. Did you spend a
And
lot of time during that time trying to figure out and dwelling on the fact of what you could have seen and that sort of thing? Did that happen a lot during that time?
oh, absolutely. I spent a lot of time looking back to see if there was something I could see. And I would say that the initial event came without warning. But over the course of the next 5 years, there were lots of warning signs that I could have seen, that maybe I did see and ignored. Maybe some of them I did follow and take. So there was lots of, there's a lot of dynamics that go on in something like that. And so yeah, there were definite warning signs all throughout the whole thing, that sometimes make a person think shoulda, coulda, woulda, what if and but how, and those are the things that keep you held down in there. Those are the things that don't allow you to be free. And when you're living in that type of negativity, it's sometimes hard to see past, what your next action is going to be for just yourself, and what's your next thought going to be, not to mention everything else and all the other dynamics and how it's affecting everything, the feelings. And yeah, yeah,
So
you're stuck. It's quicksand. It's
yeah.
quicksand.
And you're so right. And one thing you said that I think is extremely interesting is, and I'll translate, it isn't worth it.
Right.
In other words, trying to figure out why it happened, at some point it becomes not worth it. I mean, there are times
That's
when
right.
you need to figure out why things happen because you don't want them to happen in the future. But there comes a point, would you agree that there comes a point where you have to say, look, I've thought about this enough about why it happens. I've learned all I can with the way I am right now about why this happened. I've got to move on and make it better. Is that a fair statement?
Absolutely, absolutely. It's it's accurate. Absolutely. There comes a point where why doesn't even really matter, because you're there, and you can either go down in the quicksand or you can pull yourself out of it, and those are your only two choices. You either will pull yourself out of it or you won't, and you already know life is going to suck if you don't pull yourself out of it. So that the only other option is the better option. So you have to do that.
So during that time, what was the I'll say what do you feel your deepest and darkest time and the most mentally challenging, the worst piece, like that really rock, I'll call it the rock bottom moment. I mean, what do when was that? What was that? What was that kind of, pretty much that moment there in time that, you kind of, you hit rock bottom, so to speak, I guess is the best way to put it.
Yeah, well, it come a time whenever she proved to be dangerous for the rest of us to be in physical presence for me and my children, and that was when everything hit rock bottom. That was when, after 5 years of trying to care for her in that situation, that's when I realized that I was actually putting other people's lives in jeopardy, my own, my children's, and it had to stop. It had to stop. And
So what you're really saying is it got really bad, and it
yeah,
got to a point. It got to that point of no return. It got to where it was becoming dangerous to you and to everybody else, and you knew you had to make a change. Um,
absolutely.
so that means you can help people who have gotten to that point. But let me ask you a question before we go into the
Sure.
new beginning and the aftermath. If you had to do it all over again, and if you could stop before it got that bad, would you have stopped it before it got that bad and tried to do things differently to make it better sooner, knowing what you know now?
I would like to say that I would. Yeah. At the time, you're just running on autopilot then. During that time, and your thought patterns are just caught in this cycle of, I mean, and you can't see anything. You can't see past your own hand in front of your face. And so I would like to think, if I had been able to maintain the awareness then, I mean, I had it before and I lost it then, and I've had to regain it since. And the if I could have maintained my awareness through all of that, rather than giving in to the negativity and everything, I'd like to think absolutely I would have done things different and done things sooner.
And therein lies the key. So if right now, if you're watching this video and you're on autopilot, you need to continue listening to what we've got to say during the rest of Joe's hero's journey and during the getting unstuck, because it'll help you to keep from having to go through what Joe did and get all the way down to that black moment. And that's really one of, from talking with Joe offline, that's one of his goals, is to help people to not have to get to that deep dark black moment. So now we've got the deep dark black moment. Let's talk about the aftermath, which is everything that happened between the time you got right down there till now, you're out helping people change their lives. How did you start coming out of it, out of that dark place?
Well, whenever we hit rock bottom, like you was talking about, whenever that rock bottom moment hit, right there, I had to make a choice. And that single choice set in course, set a course for all the events that are to follow. And so I started to pull out of it at that moment, because I had to send her away. So send her away, because there was no other options. There was no other outcome that would be even close to a positive outcome. And that's after having explored every option there is to explore. So that one choice set things in motion for me to be able to move forward with my life. I went back to work. I went back to work in the mental health industry where I was previously, and so I for a long time, I just focused on supporting my children, learning to be a single parent, learning how to, which basically that whole 5-year period, I was essentially a single parent anyway. So as far as decision making and everything was concerned, so that was part of everything that built along the way. I had to learn to rebuild my life. I had to learn how to hardwire myself, how to change my thought processes, how to change everything about my life to create something new for myself and something successful for myself, so that I could get back to just being alive again, and just having the freedom to live my life and have control of everything that happens to me versus surrendering to circumstances.
Exactly. Well, you did what they describe, at least in my view, you did what they do on airplanes when they tell parents to put their oxygen mask on first before the kids. I mean, it's a natural inclination to want to save your children, just like you had a natural inclination to want to save your wife. People watching this video had a natural inclination to want to save their family, and they believe by doing it one way they're doing that. Well, if it's not working, you've got to look at a different way of doing things and say, okay, how do I really put on my oxygen mask? Joe, for you, it was going back to work, because if you hadn't gone back to work and put on your oxygen mask, then it would have been more of a struggle for you to be a single parent and make the right decisions for your kids. For some people, it might be getting a coach to put on their oxygen mask, right?
Right, absolutely, and that's what, as coaches, that's what we're here to do. Is we're here to hopefully turn people. Just nudge them in a direction that leads them away from that deep dark place, and then help pull them up, help them set a mindset, help them understand that they don't have to get to that point, and if they are at that point already, that you can get out.
Right. And I thought, and also something you said was very interesting. You went back to something you knew and were comfortable with in the mental health field, right?
Right.
So the interesting part is that for people on that, coming out, or for the reason that's important to somebody who wants to work with Joe as a coach, is the fact that it's something, how can I put this? So we all have stuff we knew in a previous life. It might not make us a lot of money. It might not be where we want to be. But Joe, you made the decision to say, look, it's not where I want to be right now, but I got to do something to start making things better. So for those of you watching who it's starting to get bad, you might have to revert back to something you did, even if that's not your overall goal in your future vision. Right, Joe?
Absolutely, and that's the thing. Well, I going back into that field, and not only did I go back into that field, I had to start at much lower level than I had been working in that field before, and that was a sacrifice that I chose to make, that I made a conscious decision to do, because it was going to. First off, I just needed stability at that particular point in time. I didn't care what it was, just anything that could have been stable, and so I achieved that, but when the incident with my ex-wife very first happened, and as that thing there spiraled out of control, you kind of tend to not leave a great impression on your previous employers, if you know what I'm saying, because you're constantly having to leave work in the middle of meetings. You're not pulling your share anymore, and those kinds of things, and so it devastates you, and so I mean, it can devastate you, career-wise sometimes too. But you can change that. It doesn't have to stay that way, and that's part of what I get at here. As I went back into the mental health field because it was comfort zone. And I worked my way back up a ways, and then I recognized that's when I got into coaching. That's whenever I decided that, look, I have all these skills and these talents and things that I can help people with, but I can't use any of them because I'm bound by regulatory agencies that say, no, you have to go with this single prescribed treatment or else nothing else will work, or we're not allowing anything else other than this, very strict restrictive guideline, but that you've got a technique or something that can help someone. That's whenever I had enough, and I just said, I'm going to take all of this leadership training, all of this interpersonal communication training, all of this motivation training, and all of everything that I have, and my study of human behavior, and I'm going to become someone who helps people get out of these types of situations, that helps people be able to move forward in life with success versus having to be stuck and just spinning your wheels, no matter what their definition of success may be.
I love it. I love the way you just summarized it and gave a great example of what truly happens in that aftermath of that deep dark place, of that turning point, which is you got back to what you knew, so you got back to stability. You eventually got to the point to say, what do I have that I can give to people? What is my overall, what does my portfolio say? And how can I put that in a way together so that not only am I helping people, but I'm giving something to people, but I'm also making myself happy, and I'm providing for my family and everything. So that is
Absolutely.
That is awesome, Joe. So in this first part, you're welcome. In this first part of today's Expert Showcase, we've been talking about Joe's hero's journey. You've heard about how Joe started off as a military guy, basically wanted to be an airborne ranger. I'm going to translate and go, he wanted to be an airborne ranger. And believe me, I've got some family in the military, and I've heard about airborne rangers. I've heard. So so I got to be very careful, because I'm probably going to offend, everybody who's an airborne ranger, but I'll give you this. I've heard about, So anyway, so for the people who know my people and the people in my family who are military, please don't hurt them. But anyway, that's besides it. When you see them at the reunion, don't give them a noogie because of what I just said. So anyway, in all seriousness, you heard how Joe was a military guy, went in for one reason, learned some things, got out, was successful, had a major traumatic life event, got to a deep, dark place, and was really stuck. And in the aftermath has been able to take not only his military training, but mental health training and everything else, put it together in a way that's helping him, helping you, and helping everybody. So you got to stick around, because next we're going to jump into getting unstuck, and really the core of Joe's message for today, and asking the question, are you stuck and can't move forward? And we're going to talk about 3 tips to get you going. Before we do that, we want you to stick around, but before we do that, we're going to take a very, very quick break, and then after the break, stick with us. We'll be back, and you'll hear more about how to get unstuck. So once again, stay there, and we'll be right back.
To watch the rest of this epic episode now, click on the link below the video. Do it now, you'll be glad you did. Are you still here? What are you waiting for? Watch the rest of this epic episode now by clicking on the link below the video.